She didn't have time to think. Not really. Every nerve in her body screamed, every muscle burned with exhaustion, and yet she forced herself to move faster, stumbling over roots slick with rain, tearing through the underbrush like a shadow running from something that wanted her dead. Her name was Alara, though right now, the sound of it in her own head felt like a dangerous secret, a word that could betray her. If they caught her, if anyone ever realized the truth, they would know she could hear. They would know she had been lying. Lying for 9 years. Lying to everyone who had ever tried to claim her, to bind her, to make her someone else's possession. Her chest heaved so violently she thought it might split open. Every inhale brought the taste of copper, of blood from the wound along her side, seeping through the torn fabric of her jacket. The rain didn't sting her skin, it soaked her and weighed her down, pressing her to the earth, drenching her hair, plastering it to her face. Thunder rolled over the forest like a warning, deep and endless, shaking the branches above her. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and for a moment, her heart caught. The sound shouldn't have reached her, she reminded herself, pressing her palms over her ears, a reflex, a lie she had carried for nearly a decade. Her fingers shook, wet and trembling as though the world could see right through her. Her mind spun, chaotic and sharp. 9 years. 9 years of silence, of pretending she couldn't hear anything at all, of swallowing every insult, every whisper, every bit of longing and fear that she had tried so desperately to hide. And now, running through the forest at the edge of exhaustion, with her blood mixing with the rain and the mud sucking at her boots, she felt the weight of every one of those years pressing against her chest like a stone. Why had she done it? Why had she pretended to be deaf all this time? Because they were dangerous. Because being claimed by an alpha who didn't see her for herself, but only for the power hidden in her blood, would have been the end of her. And if she had been found now, if someone caught her in this forest drenched and bleeding, all of that careful silence would have been for nothing. She stumbled over a root, pitched forward, and barely caught herself against the rough bark of a tree. Pain shot down her arm, sharp and vivid, a reminder that she wasn't invincible. She couldn't afford to be. Not now. Not ever. Her ears rang, not really, but as though her body refused to forget what it had tried to hide for years. And then the forest shifted, subtle but unmistakable, a movement in the shadows that wasn't wind, wasn't rain, wasn't animal. Her breath caught and she froze, heart hammering so violently it was loud enough in her own chest that it drowned out everything else. She had learned to trust nothing. Not a tree, not the fog rolling low across the forest floor, not even the shadows themselves. But this felt different. Something or someone was moving through the darkness toward her. And yet, she couldn't run anymore. Her legs were heavy with fatigue, her wound burning like fire, and her lungs screamed as she forced herself to draw air. Alara pressed her hands to her ears again, hiding, pretending, lying. She had spent nearly a decade perfecting this illusion, the deaf girl who couldn't hear, who couldn't respond, who couldn't be claimed. It had kept her alive, had kept her hidden. But even now, in this drenched, chaotic forest, with blood on her hands and mud on her face, she knew the lie couldn't protect her forever. Not from what or who was coming. A branch snapped nearby, and she jumped, stumbling into a small clearing she hadn't noticed in her flight. Her knees buckled, mud sucking at her boots, her chest heaving. She fell forward, landing hard against the wet earth, rain sluicing over her hair, soaking her clothes, mingling with her blood. And then she saw it, a shadow moving through the haze of rain and moonlight. Large, confident, impossible to ignore. Alara's chest seized. Her lie trembled in her hands. Her secret, the one thing she had clung to for 9 years, hung by a thread. And in that instant, she realized she wasn't just running anymore. She was exposed. Vulnerable. Seen. But she couldn't stop. Not yet. She had survived this long by hiding. She had survived this long by pretending. She had survived this long by being silent. And yet the shadow paused, just at the edge of the clearing, watching her. watching, waiting. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the terror and the blood and the storm, something stirred. A quiet, fierce heartbeat of defiance. Of power she hadn't allowed herself to fully claim. She wanted to push herself to her feet, wanted to flee, wanted to fight, wanted to scream. And yet, she couldn't tear her eyes away from the figure in the shadow. It was here. And in that moment, Elara understood that whatever this was, whatever or whoever, was standing in the rain and the mud and the chaos, her life was about to change forever. If you're already pulled into this storm of love, danger, and destiny, subscribe now to Sophie's Romance Collections. Join us daily for more epic tales where passion collides with fate. The shadow stepped closer, and for the first time, Elara saw him clearly. Tall, unyielding, every movement precise, every breath measured, as though he existed in a world that didn't allow mistakes. Rain slicked his dark hair to his forehead, clinging to him like a second skin. His eyes, those eyes, they glowed faintly in the stormlight, amber and impossibly sharp, cutting through the night as though he could see every secret she had buried in the corners of her soul. And then he spoke. Her name, Elara. Her blood froze. Her heart leapt into her throat. No one had ever spoken her name aloud for 9 years. No one had ever known it. Not her so-called friends, not the people who had tried to claim her and failed, not anyone. Yet here he was, standing in the rain, eyes like fire and ice, voice low but carrying in the wet darkness, calling her name as though it belonged to him, as though he had been waiting for it for as long as she had been hiding. Elara pressed herself against the mud, instinctively shrinking, hiding, pretending the lie that had kept her alive for nearly a decade. She couldn't trust this man. Couldn't. But every part of her ached in a way she hadn't realized she'd allowed herself to ache. Her chest tightened, every pulse a warning, every heartbeat an invitation. Why does he know me? Why does he care? Why are you here? His tone broke the fragile rhythm of the rain around them. Protective, but accusatory. As though he were both shielding her and blaming her for being here, for being caught. She swallowed hard, the cold rain filling her mouth, tasting of earth and blood. She didn't answer. Words would betray her. Silence was the only weapon she had left. Then came the sound she had been dreading, the low growl that cut through the storm like a knife. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't thunder. It was alive. Menacing. Something massive moved in the shadows behind him, a rogue wolf, black as midnight, muscles rippling beneath wet fur, eyes like molten gold burning with malice. Its teeth gleamed in the lightning flashes, and a deep, guttural snarl rumbled from its throat, shaking the air around them. Elara's heart lurched. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and every instinct screamed at her to flee. But before she could make a move, he was there. Swift. Brutal. The way he moved was unnatural, fluid, controlled, a predator in his element. His hand shot out, grabbing her shoulder, pulling her back as the wolf lunged forward with a speed that should have been impossible. He twisted, and in one fluid motion, he struck the beast, teeth and claws meeting, growls exploding, rain and blood mixing in a chaotic dance. Elara watched, frozen, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths as he fought. There was no hesitation in him, no mercy for the creature that threatened her. And yet, every motion carried purpose, as though he were protecting something fragile, something sacred, something human, something hers. And then he was at her side again, breathing hard, chest heaving under the wet jacket, hair plastered to his forehead. His gaze didn't soften, didn't offer comfort. He didn't need to. The weight in his eyes, the raw intensity, said more than words ever could. Why are you here? It demanded again, unspoken now, a tension that gripped her chest like iron chains. Elara couldn't look away. She wanted to run, wanted to collapse, wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. And yet, she was drawn to him in a way that made her skin tingle and her heart ache. She saw the edge of something dangerous in him, the kind of man who could destroy her and keep her alive all at once. The kind who could burn everything she had known and leave her begging for more. She started, but no sound came out. Her throat was raw from running, from shouting into the rain when no one could hear. Her hands, trembling, pressed against her sides, trying to steady herself, trying to remember the lie she had lived by for years. Pretend. Hide. Survive. That had been her mantra. That had kept her alive. And yet it felt hollow now, meaningless under the weight of his gaze. He studied her, head tilted, one brow raised slightly as though he were weighing her against some unseen standard. And she felt it. The pull, the undeniable force between them, fear and distrust mingling with something hotter, sharper, impossible to deny. Her body reacted before her mind could, every nerve ending alive with tension, every heartbeat synchronized with his presence. Another growl echoed from the shadows, but neither of them flinched this time. His hand hovered near the hilt of something unseen, ready. Her pulse thrummed in her ears, her blood racing, and in that chaotic moment, she realized something terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She had never met anyone like him. Never. He was not a savior, not entirely. Not yet. He was something else. Something dangerous. Something irresistible. And then, in the flicker of lightning and the pounding rain, their eyes locked. Fear flashed in hers, raw and human, but beneath it was something he could see too, the secret part of her she had hidden even from herself. The part that had survived 9 years of silence, 9 years of pretending, 9 years of running. The part that still burned with defiance, still held onto the truth that she could be more than what anyone else demanded. He didn't speak again immediately. He didn't need to. The air between them was thick with unspoken questions, unspoken promises, unspoken danger. Every instinct in her screamed at her to flee, every fiber of her being begged her to run. And yet, she didn't. Not yet. Because for the first time in years, she felt seen. Really seen. And that terrified her more than the storm, more than the blood, more than the shadow beast that still lingered in the distance. It was then that she realized, with a jolt that made her bones ache, that nothing in her life, nothing in all the years she had spent hiding, pretending, surviving, had prepared her for this. Not the fear, not the running, not the storm. Nothing could have prepared her for the force of him, the weight of his gaze, the dangerous pull she could not resist. And somewhere deep, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the mud and the rain and the wound searing her side, a tiny ember of hope sparked. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't here to claim her like the others had tried. Maybe he could see her. All of her. The broken, defiant, hidden parts that she had fought so hard to protect. Maybe, for the first time, she didn't have to pretend. But the ember flared and died as the shadow in the forest moved again. The rogue beast had not yet fled. And Alara knew, with a shiver that ran through every nerve ending, that this night was far from over. Not the storm, not the hunt, not the darkness. Everything was just beginning. Alara's knees sank deeper into the wet earth as the storm's echo faded slightly, leaving her alone with the sound of her own ragged breathing and the distant, almost imperceptible stirrings of the forest. Her heart still hammered, but not only from fear, something else pulsed through her, sharp and insistent, demanding to be acknowledged. She forced herself to take in the scene, mudslick roots clutching at her boots, rain cascading down her hair in heavy sheets, the cold seeping into her bones, but beneath it all, a memory pressed against her mind like a shadow she had tried to forget. She was 12. 12 and terrified and small in a world that whispered dark truths she could barely understand. That was when she had first realized she was different. Not like the other children, not like anyone in the village. It had started with a flicker of light in her veins when she was angry, when she cried, when she wished the world away. Her mother had noticed it first, or perhaps it had been her grandmother. She didn't remember clearly, only that the adults' eyes had changed the moment they looked at her, filled with something she could not name. Fear. Resentment. Recognition. "She'll bring ruin," the villagers whispered. At first, she didn't understand what they meant. She had heard the words even as she pretended not to, had sensed the way the whispers followed her, curling into the shadows whenever she passed. Children avoided her in the streets, calling her strange, dangerous, cursed. Their words bit deeper than any teeth could, and still, she learned to smile, to pretend, to hide. Her parents, if they had ever loved her, had abandoned her to the whispers. Their hands, once warm and comforting, had become cold instruments of rejection. She remembered hiding under the table one afternoon, listening to her father mutter about the prophecy, mutter about power she could barely comprehend. Marked, "The one who will change everything." His voice had trembled, fear laced through each syllable, but it was fear of her, not for her. That day, she realized that love could be as dangerous as enemies, as crushing as claws. She had made a choice then. One that had saved her life, one that had broken her heart every day since. She would pretend. She would become the silent one. She would fake deafness. Every question that hung in the air, every accusation, every laugh aimed at her, every warning whispered in the wind, she would ignore it. She would not respond. She would vanish behind the lie, and the lie would protect her. Years stretched endlessly. 9 years of pretending. 9 years of silence. 9 years of hiding from every alpha who might have come to claim her, from every pack that might have seen her as a weapon, a tool, or a curse. She learned the rhythms of being invisible. She learned to smile when others laughed, to tilt her head when they shouted, to nod when commanded, to speak with her eyes when words were too dangerous. Every gesture was measured, precise, perfect. Every lie a lifeline. And yet, even as she perfected her masquerade, the cost was etched into her bones. Every unspoken word became a chain around her throat. Every faked laugh cracked the mask she wore like armor. Every smile she offered the world was an echo of a life she might have had, a life stolen by fear and necessity. She felt it now, in the rain and mud and exhaustion of the forest, the weight of every day, every moment, every secret she had carried alone. Her mind drifted to the moments she had spent pretending not to hear. Children taunting her in the village square, voices sharp with cruelty. She had smiled. A merchant cursing her at the market. She had smiled. Her parents arguing about her destiny, about the prophecy, about the danger she represented. She had smiled. And in those smiles, in those endless silences, she had buried herself deeper, hiding not only from them, but from the one person she could not hide from, herself. Now, with the Alpha standing somewhere in the stormed clearing, watching her, waiting, every memory collided with the present. She felt the lie threatening to unravel. If I tell him, will he understand? Will he see me as I am, or will he turn away? Will he see the girl who survived 9 years of silence, or only the danger they all whispered about? Her hands, trembling, flexed at her sides. She could feel the pulse of the storm in her veins, the lingering sting of her wound, the ache of every muscle used to run and survive. And beneath it all, the echo of power she had long tried to suppress. That power, the silver fire she had glimpsed as a child, the strange pull in her bloodline, was still there. Always there. And now, in the presence of him, it demanded acknowledgement. Demanded recognition. She glanced to the shadow where he had stood, where he still lingered, and she felt the strangest combination of fear and pull. The lie that had protected her for 9 years felt thin, brittle, meaningless. And yet, she could not speak. Not yet. Because speaking could unravel everything. Speaking could reveal the truth she had clung to in darkness. Speaking could invite him in, and that thought terrified her more than the forest, more than the rogue beast still waiting in the shadows, more than the storm pressing cold and wet into her bones. Her chest tightened with every heartbeat. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe that he could see the truth of her without judgment, without fear, without the need to claim her like every alpha had tried before. And yet, that trust was a razor's edge. She had spent 9 years surviving because she didn't trust. She had built walls in the silence of pretending, in the heavy cadence of a life unspoken. Could she let someone in now? Could she allow him past the defenses she had spent nearly a decade perfecting? The rain stung her eyes, mixing with tears she refused to shed. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to hide, to disappear again. And yet, she could feel him. Not just his presence, though that was undeniable. Not just the strength that radiated from him, or the unyielding authority in his stance. No, she felt him in the spaces her silence had carved out, in the corners of herself that had been lonely for years. She felt the pull of recognition, the unspoken acknowledgement that he could sense her, not just the lie, not just the surface, but the core of her, fragile and fierce, broken and defiant. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the intensity of it all. Every memory, every fear, every small, hidden spark of hope collided in her chest. And in that shiver, in that ache, she realized that the storm around her was nothing compared to the storm inside. The storm that had raged for 9 years, unspoken, hidden, contained within her ribs, her heart, her blood. And somewhere deep, beneath the ache and the fear and the cold rain, she felt the faintest ember of something dangerous and exhilarating. A thought that made her pulse quicken and her breath hitch. Maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. Maybe she was meant for more than hiding. Maybe, just maybe, she could let someone see her. Really see her. The question hovered in the stormed air, heavy and impossible. Could she trust him? Could she let him witness the truth she had hidden from everyone, from herself? Could she reveal the girl who had survived 9 years in silence, pretending to be something she wasn't, and let him stay? The forest seemed to hold its breath with her. The rogue shadow in the distance paused, as though aware of the unspoken tension. The rain slowed slightly, lightning illuminating the clearing for a fleeting heartbeat, revealing her drenched, trembling form. And in that instant, she realized that nothing, no lie, no silence, no storm, could protect her from what was coming next. Not now. Not ever. Because the Alpha was still there. Watching. Waiting. And whether she ran or stayed, whether she revealed her secret or clung to it like a lifeline, her life had already changed. Her path was no longer hers alone to control. And the truth of who she was, the real Alara, the girl who had survived, who had hidden, who had endured, was waiting to step forward. The forest opened before Alara like a cathedral of shadows and silver light, rain still dripping from branches but thinner now, almost reverent in its stillness. Every tree seemed impossibly old, its bark carved with intricate lines, symbols that pulsed faintly, as though alive. A hush had fallen over the world, and for the first time since the chase, she felt a trembling stillness settle over her chest, a pause in the relentless pounding of fear and adrenaline. "This place," she whispered, though the sound barely formed, carried off by the wind and rain. She pressed her fingers to the wet bark, tracing the carvings instinctively. The grooves glowed faintly beneath her touch, responding as if they recognized her presence, responding as if they remembered her before she even knew herself. He was beside her, silent now, not commanding, not accusing, just observing. The Alpha's presence was steady, a quiet force that pressed against her back even as the chill of the forest pressed into her skin. She wanted to turn to him, to ask him what this place was, to demand answers, but something in the air, in the pulse of the forest, held her lips still. The wind shifted, and whispers rode along it, brushing against her ears even though she did not hear them as words. She saw them in fragments, in images flaring before her eyes, silver fire wrapping her arms, her hair, her chest. She saw herself standing taller than any other wolf, her eyes glowing, power streaming in waves like molten light from her veins. The visions flickered, impossible and real all at once, a mirror of a destiny she had never dared to dream she might claim. Child of the flame, the silent one who hears all. The words pressed against her mind, insistent, demanding. They echoed with a resonance she felt in her bones rather than her ears, vibrating through her chest in a way that made her shiver and stumble. Her hands went to her ears instinctively, a reflex she had honed for 9 years, but it did nothing. The forest had found her, and it could see her truth whether she spoke it or not. She trembled as the next vision came. A fractured pack, howling into the night, tearing at one another in chaos, danger, and fear. And at the center of it all, a single figure, glowing silver, commanding, unafraid, powerful beyond imagining. It was her. It had to be. The heat of the images pressed against her, warmth in the cold drizzle, a fire she could feel in the marrow of her bones. Her chest tightened with panic. I'm not worthy. I've only ever lied. I've pretended. I've hidden. How could I possibly be the one? How could destiny choose me when I am nothing but silence and deception? He stepped closer, and she felt the subtle press of his hand against her arm, not touching, but anchoring. His gaze found hers, amber eyes fierce and conflicted, as if he were weighing the truth of her against the danger of it all. Destiny doesn't lie, he said softly, voice low but firm, carrying a weight that made her heart seize. It chooses the one who can survive it, the one who can endure the fire. Her gaze dropped, uncertain, her fingers tracing the lines of glowing runes again. Survive it, endure the fire. The words pressed against her, and she wondered if she could. She had survived 9 years of silence, yes, but could she survive this? Could she survive the power rising within her, the storm of prophecy that demanded she step into it fully, without flinching, without hiding, without pretending? The forest seemed to answer her question in whispers again, in the way shadows bent around the carvings, in the way the ground beneath her trembled faintly. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She felt the stir of something within her, a warmth coiling along her spine, spreading through her arms and legs, awakening muscles long tensed by fear. It was power, raw and undeniable, and it obeyed her hesitations even as it demanded release. She looked to him again. His expression had softened slightly, though the tension in his jaw remained. There was recognition there. Understanding. Perhaps even awe. You are more than what you've allowed yourself to see, he murmured. This power, this fire, it has always been yours. You only need to claim it. Her chest heaved, a mixture of fear and longing twisting inside her. Her hands flexed, trembling at her sides, as if the forest itself were daring her to reach for what she had spent 9 years denying. She could feel it now, the truth of her own strength, the pull of something ancient and relentless that had chosen her long before she had ever learned to run or hide. And yet, doubt clawed at her throat, sharp and insistent. I've only ever lied. I've only ever hidden. I'm not a leader. I'm not the child of the flame. I'm nothing. The Alpha's gaze cut through her turmoil, amber fire against her storm of doubt. You are not nothing, he said, voice low but carrying through the clearing like a drumbeat. You are the one who has endured. You are the one who has survived. And that is what makes you ready. The wind stirred again, carrying the whispers in strange, musical cadence. They wrapped around her like silk, brushing against her hair, her face, her chest. She could feel the rhythm of destiny threading through her, threading into her blood, into her mind, into her bones. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was impossible to resist. Her hands went to her chest now, pressing against the pulsing energy she could feel coiling beneath her ribs, heat radiating outward. The visions flickered again, silver fire enveloping her, standing atop a ridge, leading a pack united, eyes glowing with strength and command, every muscle tense, every movement fluid, fearless. She swallowed hard, feeling tears sting her eyes despite the rain. She had hidden for 9 years. She had pretended. She had survived by silence and lies. And yet, in this forest, in this sacred place, she could no longer hide from what she truly was. She could no longer deny the fire waiting to claim her. The Alpha stepped closer again, presence solid and commanding. The prophecy speaks of the deaf who hears the unspoken, he said, voice steady but tinged with awe. And it is true. You hear what others cannot. You understand what others refuse to see. That is why you are chosen. That is why you are the child of the flame. Her breath caught, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest, mingling fear with exhilaration, doubt with the faintest flicker of hope. Could she be more than the girl who had survived? Could she embrace what destiny demanded, step fully into the fire, and let the power that had always been hers shape her future? The carvings glowed brighter as she lifted her gaze, amber light from his eyes reflecting against silver runes, rain dripping from her hair like molten strands. The wind whispered again, teasing the edges of visions yet unseen. She trembled, body tense, heart racing, mind alight with possibility and terror. I don't know if I can, she whispered, voice small but defiant, though the words felt impossibly loud in the sacred stillness. He did not respond immediately. He let her words hang in the mist, letting the storm of her doubt and the storm of the forest collide. And then, softly, he said, "You can. Because you already have. You survived. You endured. That is the fire they spoke of, and it burns inside you, whether you believe it or not. Destiny does not lie, Alara." Her name fell from his lips again, and it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like an anchor, a tether to something greater than herself. Something she could not yet fully grasp, but knew she must follow. And in the quiet of the sacred forest, amidst whispers and runes and visions of silver fire, Alara realized the first undeniable truth of what awaited her. She could no longer run from who she was. She could no longer hide behind lies. She was the child of the flame. She was the silent one who hears all. And if she chose, she could step into a destiny that would change everything: her life, her pack, and the world she had spent 9 years trying to survive. The forest seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, the rain falling softer now as if the storm itself had paused to witness the moment. And in that pause, she felt something awakening within her, a fire, fragile yet fierce, waiting for her to claim it fully. The Alpha's gaze did not leave her, amber fire steady against the swirling visions and shadows. "Are you ready?" he asked, the words almost a challenge, almost a promise. Alara's fingers curled into fists, her chest tight with anticipation, fear, and the faintest spark of hope. She could feel the energy thrumming beneath her skin, calling her forward. She could feel destiny pressing against her ribs, demanding recognition, demanding courage, demanding action. And though doubt still lingered, fierce and biting, she understood one thing with absolute clarity. She could no longer deny the fire waiting inside her. She could no longer pretend to be silent. She could no longer hide. She was the child of the flame. And the world, for all its shadows and whispers, would have to reckon with her. The sacred forest, so still and reverent moments before, erupted into chaos. Shadows moved at the edges of the runes, but this time, the shadows carried claws, teeth, and voices laced with anger and fear. Rival alphas, the so-called protectors of law and tradition, stepped from the trees like predators who had been waiting for this exact moment. Their presence hit her like a thunderclap, heavily armed, eyes sharp, pack markings glinting faintly under the stormlight. Alara's stomach dropped. The visions, the prophecies, the awakening fire within her, it hadn't prepared her for this. Not for the weight of all those who had whispered, judged, and condemned her finally stepping into the open. The forest seemed to shrink around her, leaves shivering with tension as the Alpha beside her squared his shoulders, every muscle coiled and ready. He was no longer the shadow she had first seen. He was the storm incarnate, and yet even he seemed wary, calculating which movements would protect her, which would repel the horde that had come for judgment, or worse. "Stop them," a voice barked through the downpour, sharp and commanding. It wasn't just the threat of claws and fangs, words lanced through the tension, accusations wrapped in venom. "She lied to all of us. She's dangerous. The prophecy cannot be trusted with a deceiver." Alara froze, her mind a whirl of rain, blood, and betrayal. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to vanish into the forest as she had done for 9 years. And yet, she couldn't tear her gaze from the Alpha. He was watching her, amber fire cutting through the storm, his jaw set, fists clenched. The way he held himself told her he would fight. Fight with everything in him, but there was something heavier there, a tension that threaded between his duty to his pack and the silent promise he had made with his gaze when he first saw her in the rain. The first strike came with a blur of movement. Claws raked across bark, snapping splinters into the wet air. The rival Alpha lunged, teeth bared, growl echoing like rolling thunder. The Alpha beside her met him head-on, his own claws flashing, teeth slicing through rain-slick air. The sounds were deafening, a symphony of fury, fear, and survival, punctuated by shouts, the hiss of claws scraping, and the wet slap of combat in the mud. Elara stumbled backward, mud sucking at her boots, her side still burning from her old wound. She pressed her hands against herself instinctively, trying to keep from screaming, trying to keep from reacting in a way that would give her away. Her mind reeled. He could be hurt, he could die, and she would have nowhere to run because the forest itself had become an arena, the predators around them a living, breathing storm. Another Alpha lunged toward her companion, and she felt her pulse spike. She had to move, had to act, but fear knotted her stomach. I can't interfere. I'm nothing. I'm silent. I'm powerless. And yet, the instinct to protect him, who had seen her in the storm, who had called her name when no one else had, rose like a tide she could not hold back. The Alpha beside her struck again, claws raking through flesh, teeth sinking into the shoulder of a rival, growl rolling deep and low as he threw himself into the fray. Rain slicked the ground, every movement sending mud flying, every strike sending splintered bark into the storm. And through it all, he kept glancing toward her, amber eyes softening for the briefest heartbeat before returning to fury and precision. His gaze pleaded without words, run. Survive. But stay. Don't leave me. Her breath came in shallow bursts, and the ache in her chest from running, from fear, from blood, pulsed in time with the battle. She saw him deflect another blow, heard a howl of frustration from a rival pack member, and felt the pull of power she had spent years hiding stir beneath her skin. The forest seemed to hum, as though recognizing the tension between what was and what must be. And for the first time, she felt something other than fear, the desire to fight. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not against the tide before her. And then a sharp strike glanced too close to him, a flash of danger that made her stomach drop, and he caught her gaze again. Run. The word passed between them without sound, without gesture. It was a command wrapped in concern, edged with longing, impossible to ignore. Her legs moved before her mind could protest. She bolted, slipping over roots, mud sucking at her boots, rain washing over her in relentless sheets. But every step carried guilt, carried tension, carried the ache of leaving him behind in a storm he hadn't asked to weather alone. The sound of combat stayed with her, claws and teeth and shouts colliding in a symphony of chaos that would haunt her long after she had escaped the immediate danger. Behind her, she could see flashes of amber light, his eyes, his presence, unwavering amid the fury. Even in the chaos, he was a constant, an anchor in a world that had never offered her one. And yet, the shouts continued, accusations cutting through the storm like knives. She is a liar, one voice roared. She cannot be trusted. Another, the prophecy is false if it clings to her. Her chest ached with the weight of every whispered word she had spent years running from. And she realized then that this clash was more than survival. It was proof. Proof that the world she had hidden from, the packs, the councils, the rival alphas, would not yield. They would challenge her, test her, and perhaps even attempt to destroy the fragile life she had clawed out in silence. She stumbled into a narrow thicket, mud and blood and rain mixing on her skin, and pressed herself flat against a tree. Her hands shook violently, her breath ragged, as she tried to force herself to be silent, to be invisible. But the memory of his gaze, that pleading, protective fire, burned in her chest. She knew, deep in her bones, that he had risked everything for her, and that knowledge carried a weight heavier than any threat, any blow, any accusation hurled across the battlefield. The clash behind her reached a crescendo. Roars echoed through the sacred forest, claws raked flesh, and lightning illuminated the chaos in brief, violent flashes. The Alpha's figure moved like a tempest, striking, defending, retreating, advancing, all at once, fluid, precise, unstoppable. And through it all, She felt the tug of something deep inside her, a pulse of energy, a spark of fire she had denied herself for years. "I can't," her mind screamed. But another part of her, sharper, more insistent, whispered, "He trusts me. He sees me. He won't leave me behind. I can't leave him." The storm began to abate slightly, rain falling softer now, mist rising from the forest floor as the rival forces hesitated, regrouped, unsure of how to contend with the Alpha's fury and the mysterious energy pulsing through the clearing. He turned briefly, amber eyes finding hers in the mist, and the world seemed to shrink until it was just them, the distance of chaos between them dissolved by a glance. "Run," he commanded again, voice low, almost broken by the tension. "Survive." But his eyes, fiery, pleading, spoke louder than the words. "Stay. Fight. Trust me." Her legs obeyed, but every step tore at her, every leap through mud and underbrush a betrayal of instinct and heart. And in the midst of fleeing, she understood the cruel truth: nothing, not the storm, not the rival packs, not the fury of the world, could separate them entirely. Their bond had been forged in the first gaze, in the stormed forest, in the shared pulse of life and danger. And no matter how far she ran, that connection, fragile yet fierce, would follow her into the shadows, into the fire, into whatever destiny awaited. She glanced once more, daring a look back. He was a figure of raw strength and relentless determination, fighting not just for his survival, but for her safety, for the fragile ember of trust they had sparked together. And in that instant, she swore silently, burning with guilt and longing, that she would not let this moment, this storm, define her. That she would rise. That she would fight. That she would embrace whatever it meant to survive and endure. And perhaps, one day, to stand beside him as more than prey, more than protected, more than the girl who had run for 9 years. The forest faded behind her as she stumbled into the mouth of the cave, limbs trembling, chest heaving, rainwater dripping from her hair in rivulets. Inside, the air was warmer, dry in contrast to the storm that had chased them through the sacred woods, carrying a smoky scent from the fire the Alpha had built, simple, small, yet defiant against the darkness. He was crouched near the fire, his form outlined by flickering orange light and shadows that danced across jagged walls. When he saw her, he rose, every motion taut with controlled energy, eyes scanning her as though memorizing every trembling detail, every fleck of mud and blood clinging to her skin. She felt exposed, vulnerable in ways she had never allowed herself to be. And yet, the weight of his gaze was not judgmental. It was steady, grounding, dangerous in its intensity, but tethering her to something she hadn't realized she needed. "Sit," he commanded softly, voice low, carrying authority but no accusation. She obeyed, collapsing near the fire, knees drawn to her chest. The warmth seared against the chill in her bones, yet it could not thaw the tremor that ran through her, the same tremor that had gripped her for 9 years every time someone had drawn too close to the truth she had hidden. He knelt before her, hands surprisingly gentle despite their roughness, dipping a cloth into water and pressing it against the gash along her side. She flinched at the touch, more from instinct than pain, but his gaze caught hers, steady and unwavering. "It's only cleaning it," he murmured, amber eyes locked on her face. "You don't have to fight me." Her throat tightened. 9 years of silence had conditioned her to react to every touch, every word, with caution. Every time someone approached, she instinctively built walls, turned away, or disappeared into herself. Yet here, in the flickering warmth of the cave, with the storm muted outside, a strange and dangerous feeling began to take root. Trust. Hesitant. Fragile. And yet impossible to ignore. I don't know if I can," she whispered, voice catching, ragged with exhaustion. Her fingers flexed at her sides, trembling. "I've hidden for so long. How can anyone?" Her words faltered. She couldn't finish. There was too much history, too many lies, too many years of pretending. "You can," he interrupted softly, his hand hovering over hers for a heartbeat before retreating, as though giving her the choice to bridge the distance. "Because even when you're silent, I hear you louder than anyone. Her breath caught in her throat. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp lines, the shadows, the traces of battles survived and scars earned. She searched his eyes, trying to reconcile the fury she had seen in the storm, the amber force that had fought the rival packs, with this quiet, deliberate tenderness now. How can one person hold both fury and care? How can he be so overwhelming, yet so careful? He dipped the cloth again, gently pressing it to her wound. His hands were rough, scarred, but careful, moving with deliberate attention. She flinched once more, then allowed herself to relax fractionally, letting the warmth of the fire, the strength of his presence, and the soothing rhythm of his care settle her frazzled nerves. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the fire crackled, shadows twisting and stretching across the walls. The silence was heavy, yet not oppressive. It was intimate, a cocoon of tenuous safety in a world that had tried so hard to crush her. Finally, she spoke, voice low, hesitant. Why, me? Out of all the people, all the packs, all the chaos, why choose me? His gaze softened, eyes lingering on her face, searching, assessing, and perhaps unraveling. Because he said slowly, deliberately, even when you're silent, I hear you. I hear what no one else does. I see what no one else can. You're not just surviving Alara. You're resisting the world's attempts to break you. And that commands attention. The words settled in her chest like molten fire, warming her from the inside out. A flush of heat traveled up her neck, a mixture of embarrassment, awe, and an ache she didn't know she could feel. His gaze held her, unrelenting, as though he were mapping her soul with amber eyes, and every tremor in her body seemed amplified by the intensity of it. Her hands twitched toward his, fingers curling instinctively, yearning to bridge the space between them. He leaned just slightly closer, the heat from his body mingling with hers, and she could feel her pulse hammering, echoing in her ears like the remnants of the storm outside. Every instinct screamed to pull back, to hide, to maintain the distance she had always clung to. Yet another part of her, a part she had denied existence for 9 long years, whispered, Don't turn away. Don't hide. Not now. The space between them shrank, breath mingling, hearts thundering, and the almost kiss hovered in the charged air like a delicate, fragile thread. She could taste the rain still lingering on his skin, smell the forest and fire mixing in the air around him, feel the raw strength and careful intent in every inch of his presence. And then a noise outside. A faint shift in the underbrush, the brush of movement too deliberate to be wind. Their shared tension snapped instantly, amber eyes finding hers in a silent agreement. Not now. Not yet. Danger still lingered. He straightened slightly, voice low and measured, but the tension behind it spoke louder than the words. Stay close, he ordered, hand hovering near hers still, ready, protective. No one comes through this night without answering to me first. Her body went rigid, every nerve ending alert, but beneath the armor of fear and instinct, her chest ached with the memory of almost touch, the near connection that had been interrupted. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and entirely new. And yet, she knew even as the shadows pressed in, even as the storm outside lingered, even as the world still sought to undo her, the bond they had sparked in the stormed forest, in the clash, in the firelit cave, was undeniable. For the first time in years, she let herself breathe fully, despite the tension, despite the threat, despite the ache of unsaid words and unbridled attraction. She let herself imagine that perhaps, just perhaps, she could trust him, not fully, not yet, but enough to begin to step out of the silence she had worn like armor for nearly a decade. The firelight danced across their faces again, shadows stretching and mingling. His hand, rough and sure, hovered a fraction closer. Her pulse surged in response, a dangerous, intoxicating rhythm. And though the forest outside whispered threats, though the rival packs and council members still loomed beyond their fragile sanctuary, inside the cave, in that fleeting, tenuous space, there was only the heat of firelight, the press of shared presence, and the thrum of hearts learning to trust, learning to see each other across years of silence and scars. And in that silence, almost suffused with the scent of smoke and rain, she understood the fragile, terrifying truth: survival had brought her here. Fate had brought him here. And perhaps, against the odds, desire and something stronger, something unspoken, was beginning to bind them together. The noise outside lingered, a reminder of the world's insistence, but for a heartbeat, a moment, they were just two souls, two bodies, two hearts teetering on the edge of trust, longing, and uncharted desire. And in that heartbeat, the storm, the chaos, the prophecy, the battles, all of it, felt both distant and inevitable. She swallowed hard, the ache of wanting him, the fear of the world, the memory of 9 years of silence, and the spark of destiny mingling into a potent, overwhelming brew. And as the fire flickered, shadows twisting across the cave walls, she knew something had changed. The Alpha had seen her. Not the lie, not the silence, not the girl she had pretended to be, but the truth beneath it all. And in the glow of that firelight, she realized she could no longer pretend, not to him, not to herself, not to the destiny that had been waiting for her since she was 12. The dawn broke slowly over the sacred forest, brushing pale light across damp leaves and glistening bark, and Alara felt it as more than a sunrise. She felt it as a pulse beneath her skin, a fire stirring along her spine, a heartbeat of her own power finally waking after 9 long years of silence and hiding. The silver fire she had glimpsed in visions, the trembling energy that had whispered her name in the storm, now throbbed in her veins like molten light, waiting to be claimed. Her hands flexed instinctively, fingers sparking with faint silver flames, and she realized she no longer flinched at her own strength. The weight of years pretending, hiding, surviving in silence, pressed against her chest, then lifted in a wave of clarity she hadn't known she could feel. This was hers. Every scar, every fear, every quiet suffering, it belonged to her, and now it fueled her, sharpened her, demanded recognition. She rose to her feet in the clearing, the forest still and watchful around her. The rain had cleared, leaving mist rising from the underbrush like smoke, curling in delicate spirals around roots and rocks. Every breath she drew felt electrified, each heartbeat a drumbeat calling her forward. She could see the flickers of power in the trees, the way the forest itself seemed to lean in, as though acknowledging her transformation. "I pretended to be deaf for 9 years to survive," she murmured to the empty clearing, voice low but fierce. The words rolled off her tongue like molten iron, tangible and real. "But now, I live to fight. I live to be seen, to be heard, to be me." Her silver fire flared in her hands as she lifted them to the sky, rain and mist twisting in luminous spirals around her fingertips. Each movement drew more confidence, more certainty, more defiance. The forest, the runes, the distant echoes of prophecy, they were no longer threats. They were mirrors of her power, amplifying what she had denied herself for too long. Days passed, or perhaps weeks. Time lost its meaning as she trained, as fire became not just vision but reality. She learned to bend it, channel it, command it with precision and intent. She faced her fears in the dark. The memories of ridicule, of exile, of the pacts that had tried to crush her spirit. She faced herself in the mirror of silver light, and for the first time, she did not flinch. She roared into the empty forest, a sound that shook the trees and rattled the mist, a declaration to the world and to herself: "I am here. I am not afraid. I will not be hidden anymore." And then he came. The Alpha found her in the clearing as the sun dipped low, golden light striking through the mist. He approached cautiously, every step measured, amber eyes flickering with the storm of regret, admiration, and longing he had carried since the day he had first seen her run. His presence was steady, commanding, yet restrained, as if he knew the power she now held demanded both respect and awe. "Alara," he said, voice low, trembling with a mix of apology and confession. I should have protected you better. I should have." She raised a hand, silencing him before he could continue. Her silver fire glowed faintly around her fingertips, a halo of light that framed her fierce gaze. "No," she said, voice clear, firm, resolute. "It's not about what you should have done. It's about what I will do, what I have become. You don't get to apologize for my life, because I claimed it. I fought for it. I survived, and I am not your secret, your burden, or your shadow." He lowered his gaze, chest heaving, amber fire flickering as he absorbed the truth in her tone. He had seen her broken, had watched her hide, had fought to keep her alive, but now she was unbreakable. And the truth of it both terrified and captivated him. Tears welled in his eyes despite the storm of pride and frustration he had carried for months. I lost sight of you. I was so afraid of what the world would do to you that I forgot who you were, that I forgot what you were capable of. You've outgrown all my fears, Alara." She stepped closer, every inch of distance between them charged with the electricity of emotion, danger, and desire. "If you want me," she said, eyes blazing with silver light, "it won't be as your broken secret. It won't be as someone you pity, someone you hide. It will be as your equal. As someone who commands her own fire, her own destiny. Not just beside you, but with you as an equal, in every way." He lifted his hands slightly, hesitant, as though afraid to break the fragile balance of power and respect she had so clearly claimed. "You are more than I ever imagined," he whispered. His voice carried the weight of battles, losses, regrets, and the impossible hope that somehow, against all odds, they could stand together in the face of prophecy, in the face of the Pax, in the face of a world that had tried to silence her. The forest around them was still, watching, bearing witness to this declaration. Silver light wrapped around her like a cloak, mist swirling in luminous tendrils around her feet, and the distant mountains trembled faintly under the weight of unleashed power. She felt it, too, the raw energy coursing through her, the connection to him, the fire of destiny igniting fully, claiming her body, mind, and spirit. "I am not your sacrifice," she said, voice rising in defiance, a challenge to the world, to the rival Pax, to anyone who had ever doubted her. "I am not your hidden secret, your pawn, or your shadow. I am Alara. I am fire. I am power. And if you want me, you will meet me here as I am. No less. No compromise." He took a step closer, amber eyes meeting her silver gaze, tension coiling between them like a living thing. "I do," he breathed, voice breaking. "I've always wanted you. Not the shadow. Not the girl hiding in silence. I've wanted the truth of you. The fire. The power. The strength. The whole of you." Her chest heaved, tears mingling with rain that still clung faintly to her skin. The world had tried to break her. Fate had tried to dictate her. Rival Pax had tried to claim her. And yet here she stood, fully herself, unafraid, untamed, alive with power she had earned, and ready to meet destiny head-on. The wind picked up, rustling the mist, swirling silver fire along the edges of the clearing, whispering in voices she had once thought silent. She felt it, the prophecy, the storm, the world bending to acknowledge her claim. And though challenges awaited, though rivals would rise, though every test would push her further than before, she no longer doubted her place, her power, or her worth. The Alpha stepped closer, hands tentative but unflinching, matching her gaze, matching her intensity, standing with her as an equal, not a protector, not a judge, but as a partner in the fire, in the destiny, in the battles yet to come. And in that moment, amidst the glow of silver fire and amber eyes, amidst the echoing mountains and sacred forest, Alara finally understood the truth she had been running from for 9 years. She was no longer silent. She was no longer hidden. She was no longer prey. She was fire, she was power, she was destiny, and she would never allow anyone to claim her voice or her fate again. The forest was a battlefield, trembling under the weight of anticipation, anger, and raw, unbridled power. Mist coiled between gnarled trees like ghostly serpents, carrying the metallic scent of blood and the sharp tang of fear. Rival alphas had gathered in a crescent around them, their shadows long and menacing under the dim light of a stormed sky. Wolves snarled, claws dug into mud, teeth bared, eyes reflecting the chaos of the approaching conflict. Ilara's chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath a drumbeat of resolve, a pulse of silver fire that hummed beneath her skin. She could feel it now, coursing through every vein, every muscle, an extension of herself she no longer needed to hide. The air vibrated with anticipation, thick with tension, and for the first time in 9 years, she felt fully alive, not hiding, not silent, not running. The alpha was at her side, as he had been since the stormed forest, since the firelit cave, since the moments that had defined their fragile trust. His presence was steady, unyielding, and yet pliant to her rhythms, his eyes a mirror of determination and devotion. He did not speak now, there was no time for words, but his stance, his movement, his unwavering focus shouted louder than any sentence. He had chosen her, and he would prove it in action, not rhetoric. The first clash came like a thunderclap. Rival packs surged forward, shadow beasts leaping from the trees with guttural roars, eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. Steel and claw met flesh and fire in a cacophony that shook the earth beneath their feet. Ilara raised her hands, silver fire igniting along her arms, tendrils arcing toward the advancing creatures. The flames danced with intent, controlled but fierce, licking through the fog, striking foes with precision. Every movement was fluid, decisive, a symphony of power and grace that mirrored the control she had claimed over herself. The alpha lunged beside her, teeth snapping, claws tearing, every strike deliberate, every motion synchronized with hers. He deflected an attack aimed at her back, growl low and feral, eyes burning with the same unspoken pledge he had given in the cave. I will not let you fall. Her breath caught in her throat, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of being seen, being fought for, being trusted. Around them, the forest convulsed with chaos. Rival alphas barked orders, packs shifted, shadows twisted, and betrayal within their ranks surfaced as a knife in the dark, a sharp reminder that threats were not always external. A former ally lunged at the alpha with malice in their eyes, teeth aimed at his throat, but Ilara's silver fire arced, a streak of incandescent fury, stopping the attack in a flash, illuminating her face with a fierce, untamed glow. She felt the adrenaline, the power, the rush of control, and she let it flow through her entirely. Every step she took was deliberate, every strike measured, every breath a rhythm of fire and instinct. She moved like the storm, like the lightning she had fled from all those years ago, unstoppable, unflinching, radiant with the truth of her existence. Shadows recoiled before her, rival alphas hesitated, and the battlefield seemed. The alpha fought with her, their movements a dance forged in trust and forged in shared survival. They moved as one, deflecting attacks, striking down foes, protecting each other with an intimacy that did not need words. Each glance, each motion, carried the weight of unspoken vows, of long years of running and hiding, of moments of firelit connection and stolen trust. And then the climax approached, the moment that would define everything. A shadow beast, massive and coiled with malice, lunged toward her, faster than thought, teeth snapping mere inches from her throat. Instinct screamed to step back, but she froze, the silver fire flaring brighter than ever, illuminating the dark corners of the battlefield. She was ready to give herself, to sacrifice her body to protect the alpha, to end this threat at the cost of her life. The world slowed, the snap of claws, the hiss of breath, the crackle of her own power suspended in a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, he was there. Strong hands gripped her arms, pulling her back with a force that was both gentle and unyielding. His eyes locked on hers, amber blazing, raw emotion spilling across his features. "Not like this," he growled, voice hoarse with urgency and fury. "I choose you. Now. Always. I will not lose you." Her heart pounded, tears mingling with sweat and rain, and for the first time in years, she let herself truly breathe. Not in hiding, not in silence, not in fear, but in recognition of her own strength and of the bond that had carried them to this moment. Together, they struck, side by side, a singular force of silver and amber light. The rival packs faltered, shadows screamed, and the forest trembled under the weight of unleashed, united power. But the final victory was not in destruction alone, it was in unity. Ilara extended her fire outward, not to burn, not to annihilate, but to envelop, to heal, to command the attention and loyalty of the fractured packs. Her silver light intertwined with the Alpha's presence, radiating a strength that demanded recognition and respect. The prophecy, whispered for generations, trembled at their feet. The deaf who hears the unspoken shall lead the fractured pack, it had said. And she did, not by destruction, but by strength, by clarity, by asserting herself fully, unafraid, undeniable. Rivals lowered claws, beasts hesitated, and slowly, the packs, united by respect and awe, fell in line. Breath-heaving, body exhausted but alive, she turned to him, amber and silver light mingling in their eyes. "I am not your sacrifice," she said again, voice steady, resolute. "I am not a pawn, a secret, or a shadow. I am Ilara. I am fire. I am power. I am destiny." He took her hand then, firmly, with reverence, matching her intensity, matching her gaze. "And I choose you," he said, voice low, thunderous with emotion. "Not because I can protect you. Not because you need saving. But because I want you. Fully, as my equal, in every way. Always." The forest, the mist, the storm-touched mountains around them, seemed to exhale. The prophecy had been fulfilled, not through fear or death, but through courage, love, and unwavering choice. Together, they stood, two forces of fire and will, unbroken, unstoppable, a testament to survival, to destiny, and to the power of choosing each other in a world that had tried to dictate every step. And in that moment, amid the remnants of battle, the scent of rain, blood, and silver fire, the truth became clear. The world could throw everything at her, storms, rivals, betrayal, but nothing could extinguish the fire she had claimed, the voice she had earned, or the bond she had forged with the one who saw her fully, without compromise, without fear. They had won. Not because the world bent to them, but because they had refused to bend to it. Not because prophecy dictated their path, but because they had claimed it. Not because survival had demanded sacrifice, but because love, strength, and destiny had demanded courage. And in the quiet aftermath, amid shadows and smoke, Ilara finally smiled, not a smile of relief, not a smile of hiding, but a smile of triumph, of recognition, of fire claimed and destiny fulfilled. The battlefield had quieted. Mist curled lazily through the sacred forest, now softened by the dawn's first light. Branches dripped with rain, leaves glimmered as if kissed by silver, and the echoes of combat faded into distant murmurs. The air was heavy with relief and exhaustion, but beneath it all, a fragile, precious calm began to settle. Ilara stood in the clearing, the silver fire that had surged around her fading to a gentle glow, lingering only as a whisper of power. Her chest heaved, muscles trembling, yet there was no fear in her. The world had tested her, battered her, forced her into silence and shadow. But now, for the first time in 9 years, she felt the steady rhythm of herself. Strong. Seen. Heard. Whole. The pack had gathered slowly, wary at first, eyes wide with awe and tentative respect. Some lowered their heads in acknowledgement, others simply watched, hesitant to step forward into the presence of the one who had wielded silver fire with such unshakable purpose. And in their hesitation, Ilara understood, the scars of fear did not vanish overnight, but acceptance could be earned. And she had claimed it, not through hiding, not through silence, but through courage. She turned to him, and in that moment, the storm of tension and chaos that had defined their lives seemed to dissolve. His amber eyes met hers, steady, warm, and unwavering. He took her hands in his, not with ownership, not with dominance, but with the gentle insistence of equal hearts meeting. "I hear you," she whispered, voice breaking, soft and trembling, carrying every year of silence, every hidden fear, every unspoken thought. "I always did." The words were small, yet they carried weight heavy enough to silence the ghosts of the past. The Alpha's lips curved into a tender smile, the first he had shown without restraint in weeks, a mirror of vulnerability and trust. He leaned close, hands brushing her shoulders, a silent promise etched into the brush of his fingers. He marked her then, not as a prize, not as property, but as a partner. A gesture of equality, of devotion, of shared destiny. Firelight and silver flames flickered around them as he traced the ancient sigil, binding them not in possession, but in recognition of the strength and power they each possessed, now intertwined. The forest seemed to lean closer, the mist curling around them in celebration, as if the very air itself blessed their union. And then, with hearts beating in tandem, they drew close. Lips met under the pale glow of the moon, silver fire flaring around them like a living halo, a blessing of the trials survived, the battles won, the truths embraced. It was a kiss that carried years of silence, years of hidden pain, years of longing, and turned it into something fierce, tender, and unbreakable. Every doubt melted away in that embrace, every fear soothed by the knowledge that they had chosen each other fully, wholly, without compromise. Elara pulled back slightly, eyes shining with a mixture of triumph, relief, and joy. "For 9 years," she murmured, voice soft, but carrying the weight of all she had endured, "I lived in silence. But in the end, it was my voice and my heart that claimed my destiny." He nodded, brushing a lock of wet hair from her face, amber eyes glimmering with reverence and awe. "And I," he said quietly, "will never let it be silenced again. Not by the world. Not by fate. Not by anyone." Around them, the forest hummed, the mist shimmering in the early light, the packs gathered in quiet acknowledgement, and the world, at least for this moment, seemed to breathe with them. They had fought, survived, and emerged not just victorious, but united, two forces of fire and will, equal and unshakable, bound by choice, by destiny, and by a love that refused to be hidden. And as silver flames flickered softly around them, casting light on rain-soaked leaves and glistening branches, they stood together under the moonlight, knowing that whatever storms may come, whatever battles may rise, they would face them side by side, unbroken, untamed, and forever chosen. If this story set your heart on fire, don't forget to subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. More tales of forbidden love, destiny, and devotion await you, ready to sweep you into worlds of passion, peril, and unbreakable bonds.